Welcome to the Momentum Matters podcast, where we have courageous conversations with women leaders. You'll hear about their accomplishments, their experiences, their challenges, and best advice. If you are inspired by women who have overcome the barriers and gone on to do extraordinary things, you are in the right place.
Welcome to Momentum Matters. I am April Benetollo, and I'm your host for today's episode. We have a most inspirational guest with us today. I'm so thrilled to have Magie Cook on the show. Magie is going to be our keynote speaker at the Momentum Leaders Annual Leadership Conference in March of 2026. And she is phenomenal. I have watched all of her promo videos. I follow her on Instagram. I got up and walked this morning for 30 minutes, even though it was freezing cold. Got my dog out there because that's what Magie says we all should do, among many other things. So I'm really excited to dig into this. So Magie grew up in an orphanage in Mexico, got a basketball scholarship to play in West Virginia, and upon graduation, experienced some difficulties, and then started a salsa business with $800 and grew that salsa business into an extraordinary company that she was able to sell later for $231 million. So we're going to talk today about Magie's, where she found the resilience, where she found the resourcefulness, and where she found the relentlessness to succeed in the way that she has. And if I am a betting woman, I'm going to say that Maggie's going to leave us with some practical tools that really we can start using every day. If nothing else, a little tip to walk for 10 to 30 minutes after every meal. So Magie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
Wonderful. Well, let's kind of dig straight in. I want to hear a little bit, have you share with our listeners your origin story. You grew up in an orphanage in Mexico, and can you tell us what were some of the lasting effects that had on you?
So I was actually born there, and the lasting impact has been nothing but adversity, but that has turned me into the person that I am today. And I would never change anything from the past because that's been my message. And that's been something that I've been able to leverage to really inspire, to make a difference now. But I mean, starting out, growing up in an orphanage with 60 other kids that were adopted and then 200 other kids that lived there, it was never easy because there's only 2 caregivers for all of us. And there's a lot of things that happened that went on that came from the kids from the streets. There's a lot of different types of suffering, abuse, all kinds of stuff. And, we grew ourselves up. We were paired with an adult when I was a kid, and I was paired with a kid when I was an adult. So we kind of experienced parenting in many different ways. Maybe that's one of the reasons I don't have kids now. I don't know, but it was really rough, and it's to the point where my escape was to digging a cave in the canyon, on the side of a mountaintop canyon, and it was my secret hiding place where I would futurecast myself into success. I would imagine that I was a super successful woman with long hair, even though I have short hair, behind a mahogany desk with these heels, and even though I hadn't lived outside the barbed fence, I was futurecasting myself for 18 long years. And I have to pinch myself because I am here today where I am because of the choices, because of the adversity, what we choose. But we experience so many things from being so hungry, for 2 to 3 weeks. I don't know if you've ever been hungry for that long, but it's so painful. You can't think, you can't be. And that's, I became a hunter. I was hunting with a knife, jumping out of trees with nets and spotlights with my brothers to catch our prey. And it was a really difficult time of my life, even more difficult so because one thing that people don't know about me, a lot of people don't know about me out there, is that I was not adopted. I was one of 8 biological kids, but we suffered the most because my father told my mother to disregard us because he was so afraid that the adopted kids would feel like they're less than, and they would run away,
Mm.
and they needed more money in the orphanage. If they had more kids, they would get more support from the US. And I caught him doing this. He thought nobody was listening when he came into the kitchen that night. And it made me think of the Cinderella story, even though the roles are reversed, right? And there's no Prince Charming that saves you. So we suffer the most, the 8 of us biological kids.
Yeah.
And that's just the life that from there on, it was survival for me, and it was mindset. It was you really using my mind to get out of the point of suffering, but how could I explore? How could I um, be and do something big? And it goes back to one moment, one defining moment when I was 6 years old. I was coming down the orphanage from the main house by the gate, by the road. There's a clinic. My father gave medical attention to the poor on Sundays. And it was the last patients that were coming out. And I was walking down towards the clinic, and he comes out and he comes to me and squeezes my head. I thought it was going to pop. And he says, "Do you know how poor these people are?" And I said, "No, how?" He said, "Look at the mother's chanclas, her shoes. They're like on their last leg. Look at the little babies' bellies. They're really big. And look how thin and yellowish their hair is." And he said, "I never want you to be that poor." And he squeezed me again. My defining moment was when I turned around. He went back to them and said, "Here's money for taco and for the bus fare." I turned around and I remember looking at the sky. I remember where I was, everything in detail. And I said to myself, I'm going to be and do something big so that I can come back someday and help my brothers and sisters.
Mm.
That was my defining moment. And there's just so much to this story. Uh, when my cave was discovered, I was heartbroken. I dug it when I was 6 or 7. It was discovered when I was 14. To get to this thing, you had to crawl.
And that's an age when you really needed it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it was discovered and I was devastated. And what I did next was um, being bold and having the courage to do something that I've never done, to explore outside the boundaries, which means I decided to leave the property of the orphanage, and I've never done that before, to see what I could find. And I came across a village, and these people thought I was like crazy or something. I was rough looking, dirty, and they took me in and they gave me the most delicious taquitos de frijoles con salsa. My gosh. And I said, I've never tasted food that good, because we ate food and like an onion or a potato and water with no salt. That's
Yeah.
how we ate our food. And I asked them, can you teach me how to do this so that I can, and I would take it back just so that I could see my brothers and sisters smile. And that's where salsa started. And I had no idea.
That's crazy. I want to go back to something you said when you said that was that defining moment when you said you wanted to do something to bring back to your brothers and sisters. Because in your book, you talk a lot about um, attaching your goals to something bigger than yourself. About
Yes.
and it sounds like at some point you were up there in a cave thinking, I want to be successful, I want to have high heels, I want to sit behind a mahogany desk, and it was about you. And in that
Yes.
defining moment, it became about doing something, that you do something so that you can come back and give back to your brothers and sisters.
Yes. The craziest thing about that story is that I used to have these nightmares, and I wanted to save all of them, and I could only save 5 of them because terrible things happened there. And what I was able to do because of the success, because of the choices. I was able to go back 30 years to the date later and save all of those kids. They're about to be trafficked from the same orphanage. And that
I
was like,
do. I do want to come back to that. Okay. I want to come back to this. But before we get there, you taught yourself how to play basketball while you were
yes,
in the orphanage. And then but there's a big step between teaching yourself to play basketball and getting a scholarship in the United States. So
yes.
how did that link happen? Was there someone else that helped you along the way or
Oh gosh, I wish. When I was in junior high, it was the first time that we went outside of the orphanage because we had our own school there. And I was started to think in my mind, okay, I'm in junior high. What is something that I can do that I can get so good at that could help me get out of here, like, my ticket out? And I was looking at basketball, but it was very prominent. I'm sorry, soccer. It was very prominent. Everybody played it in Mexico, but basketball was the new sport. And I remember passing the principal's office and watching the little black and white TV. It was really long, it was a little square up in the top of the shelf. And I said, hey, can I come during my breaks and watch your TV? Because Michael Jordan was playing and I wanted to learn his moves. And I said, I need to know how to play because the physical education teacher gave us a basketball, kicked it, and said, here, play. And so that's how I learned. And then I would go back to the orphanage, and I was paired up with a little boy named Pancho. He had spinal bifida. He couldn't walk. We found him in a dumpster when he was a little baby. So, when I was telling you they paired us up.
yeah.
So I would carry him with me, and I had this idea that he could help me with basketball. And so I would blindfold myself, and he would tell me, turn right, left. And I would just futurecast myself and thinking, all these people are coming to get my ball, and I'm just going to protect it. And this is how I got really, really good. So by the time I graduated high school, I got recruited to play for the Mexican national team in Mexico City. I'm only 5'2", so I'm not very, very tall, but I was really, really good. And that's what that opportunity came about.
That's incredible.
Yes.
So what was that transition like for you leaving the orphanage and going to college?
Yeah, the Mexican national team did not happen because when I went there, they wanted me to play. And then I waited 3 months, and I broke my collarbone
Oh,
playing football with my brothers. And my father said, he was a doctor. He said, your dreams are over. And I just kept saying to myself, no, if not this, there's got to be something better. And it's that mindset, you know, imagine a doctor telling you that your life is over. And so I just kept on the positive mindset. And the Mexican national team called 3 days later that happened. And it really hit me. But it was, I think it was 4 or 5 months later when my parents, because we had a bus and they would take like the half the seats from the middle to the back off so that we, like, all my 68 brothers and sisters would fit, and they would travel the US to raise funds for the orphanage. And we got invited to a picnic in West Virginia. And when we arrived, there was a basketball court behind the picnic, and that's the only thing my brothers and I saw. And we ran towards the basketball court, started to play, and that day there happened to be the coach of the University of Charleston. She
wow.
saw me play, and she went to my father and said, I want her to come play for me in a scholarship. And the thing that I always say is that if I would have really listened to what my dad told me and not played that day, I wouldn't be speaking to you today. And it's that mentality of, I don't know the how, but I know that there's something better. Just having the being open to the possibility of something better changed my life.
And then when you graduated, what were your
Yes.
choices like at that time upon
When I graduated college, I graduated with a degree in interior design, and there was only two choices. There was two interior design firms locally, and couldn't get a job. So I became homeless. I was living in out of my station wagon. I called it the Maggie Waggy. It was a little white station wagon, and I lived on that for several months, and then the engine blew, and I didn't know what to do. So I just picked up my bags and started walking, and I lived in the streets in the snow in the winter for a little while. until somebody found me on the street that was one of the cooks at the university. And she's like, "What are you doing?" She called the president, and they gave me one of the dorms to stay. And then I think it was 5 weeks later, I got entered into a fresh salsa contest for the state of West Virginia. And I won by a unanimous vote, and that was my aha moment. And the reason why that happened is because when I was in college, I would make fresh salsa for my friends. My friends would tell my teachers would have me bring it to class, and now I was known as the salsa lady. So, so that's how that started. And it started with the orphanage, with the villagers, with
That
getting the
family.
recipe. Yeah.
Have you ever seen them again?
The villagers?
That family, yeah. That
No, I haven't gone back to see them. No. A lot of the people that lived around us don't live there anymore. They've passed. But there are more people like deeper in the woods that I never got a chance to see.
Mhm. So you won this salsa competition, gave you a whopping $800.
Hmm.
And then
Yes.
what happened?
So by the way, somebody gave me that at $800 because they saw how passionate I was. Everybody was asking me, "Where do you sell this? Can we buy it?" And I was like, "Well, I don't have anything." And so he gave me $800. This guy then with a suit, he's like, "I see your passion," and he says, "I'm going to give you this as long as someday you pay it forward." And I remember buying my first chopper and my little food processor, and it was the best well spent $800 of my life. I bought containers, sold the product for $5 a pint to my friends, and I would make it a gallon batch of salsa and sell it that way, and then it just kind of grew from there. But the biggest thing for me was starting my business, not knowing anything about business. And I remember making a long list of stores to call, and I got 90 rejections that one day. And I made the list from smallest to the largest. And I remember after so many rejections, you got to think about this. I'm in West Virginia. There's nobody that spoke Spanish, or I never saw Latin people at that time that I was there. So if you were going to make a call to a supermarket saying, "I have a fresh pico de gallo de salsa," they'd be like, "What?"
Excuse me?
Yeah, excuse me, and hang up the phone on you. And so I took that list because I'd categorized it from the smallest to the largest. And there was people that are telling me, "You should quit, you should get a job. They're not going to listen to you." Closest people to me, family members, and not family members, but, people that I was dating. And even local supermarket, ready-to-eat product manufacturers would tell me, "No, it took us 6 years. They're not going to listen to you." And I remember giving myself a day to kind of compose myself because I got rejected so many times. And I turned that list upside down. That was the biggest thing I've ever done. And at the top of the list was the Whole Foods Market, which is the largest organic retailer in the US. And I called them and I was thinking, I hope they don't answer. And they didn't answer. So I was like, phew. And I left my name and my number. And my name is Maria Magdalena La Cruz Garcia. I have an awesome pico de gallo de salsa. And I think you guys would love. And I hang up and that's it. And it was like the next day I was parked in the city center in Charleston and my little beater car. And I got a call from this guy and I was like, yes. And he's like, "Is this Maggie?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "This is Eric with Whole Foods." And that's when everything kind of changed. And they were meeting the next day at 9 a.m. And I said, "I'll be there." And so I went back to the kitchen, made salsa and drove. I think this was in the evening. And I drove all night. And I barely made it in time from West Virginia to Maryland. I arrived into this massive distribution center, got into the location and entered this huge conference room, with my salsa boxes in my heels, my little dress, walking through this conference room. And they opened the salsa, they started to eat. And Eric gets up and he says, "We want your products. When can we have them?" My first question was, "Well, how much do you need?" Because I saw how huge their distribution center was. And at the time, I was making about 250 pounds of salsa for my friends. And he says, "Well, your first order is going to be 10,000 pounds of salsa." And I about fell off myself. And
Were they willing to invest or did you have to
no,
Oh, no.
actually, this is something I never talk about because nobody asked this, but when I started my salsa business, I couldn't get money. The banks wouldn't loan me money because I had nothing to show for it. And I was very upset about that. I didn't understand that. And
What year
when
was it?
2004,
Okay.
wait, Whole Foods happened 2007.
Okay.
2004 is when I started the company. And I remember going to friends and saying, hey, I need exactly $20,000 to make this product to deliver to Whole Foods next week. Can you help me? And they're like, they're the same as the banks. Or how are you going to pay me back? Do you have a contract? And I was like, well, I didn't say, do you have a contract? So I called Whole Foods and I said, hey, do you have something in writing or something that shows that you'll pay me in a week because I need to get this money? And they said, oh yeah, it's called a contract. And so I was able to show that within a week, I could borrow $20,000. I could I could make $40,000 with Whole Foods, pay back the 20, and then it would just multiply. In that year, we went from making $12,000 to $1.9 million just with Whole Foods. And really what happened next is all the people that had said no now saw me at Whole Foods started to call me. And that's really how we grew exponentially, not only because we were a fresh product like fresh salsa that it wasn't really heard of back then, but it was something that the market wasn't used to, it, which was a lot of fight back, which just happens when you have something really unique. But that really changed the rest of, for me, that was the rest is history. And, we ended up distributing products across 38 states with supermarkets like Walmart's, Whole Foods, Costco's, all these all across the United States. And then in 2015, my company sold with Garden Fresh to Campbell's for 231 million, which was a huge, the next huge thing that happened in my life. But it's been quite an amazing journey. I'm telling you, by the moment that you had that order, that you had to make 10,000 pounds of salsa, I had to cut 60,000 tomatoes. It was me and another lady, a friend, and we were like stuck like this for a week. Our hands hurt because we cut so many tomatoes. But every single step of the way was adversity. There was adversity. From the first truck that I had to drive, I didn't know that needed to get a truck driver's license, and how terrible that truck was, and how I made it to the whole, from hiring the first 20 people, because that's what I calculated that we needed if we were going to provide 10,000 pounds of salsa every single week, everything from then on. But there was a fire, there was a passion. And that's where the resiliency, the relentlessness, and all these things come together, the resourcefulness, because when you're passionate about something, the how always finds a way. The how always, you always find the way if you are that passionate, because you want to nothing is impossible. The only impossibility is what you're able to create with your mind, and it's to our own downfall.
Well, I want to hone in a little bit also on the resourcefulness. So it seems to me you can't succeed with just one of the R's. You really have to have
Yes.
all three: the resourcefulness, the resilience,
Yes.
and just the relentlessness of.
Yes.
So in here locally, in Birmingham, it's a really big food town. So
Oh,
it's very elevated. Nobody would suspect this in Alabama, but we had a very top chef come along in the 1980s that then spun out like lots and lots and lots of very, very good chefs. So there's a lot of food entrepreneurship going on. There's also a lot of tech entrepreneurship here, a lot of healthcare, biotech, fintech. So I think there's a lot of interest here in this local market of, to hear this story of, what was it that you did? You have 10,000, pounds of salsa to make. You have 20 people to hire, and you're not doing this out of a car. Like, where did you go? Did they have test kitchens? How did you get your first business loans? And, you're a woman, and you're a small woman, and you're a Latina, and, was there adversity involved with that? How did you handle these negotiations with people who might have tried to, at times take advantage of you? So that's a lot of questions, but I think
yeah.
we have curious listeners.
Yeah, one thing that I am actually so grateful and thankful for is that I never saw myself as any different than anybody else. The moment that you see yourself that you're different or that you're less than, it is a powerful energy that you're bringing to yourself that is felt. Therefore, other people treat you that way. And it's been astounding to see it happen to other people, but I never let it cross my mind. I never let it take over my emotional state, my mindset, because it's a huge limitation. I think that we all have, this is how I think, even though I'm a minority, a Latina, all these things, we all have, there's a huge piece of a pie, like a pizza. And I believe everybody has the ability to get that piece, but it's all about how hard you work for it. It's all about how creative you are about it. It's all about how passionate you are about it. Because, one of the other questions you asked is, how did you do all of this? Nobody would help me. Nobody, not even the SBA, the Small Business Administration, because they didn't know my business. So what was the best thing that I could go to? Google. That's where I learned all my stuff. I didn't even I took one business class in college, Business 101. That was it. But I didn't learn anything. But I taught myself. And actually, for me, the not knowing was a great advantage because if maybe there were limitations of somebody that knew. So every single step of the way, I was just so hungry and so passionate to make something succeed that I figured out the way. And you don't have to, yes, you can see the full picture ahead of time, but you have to remember baby steps of courage along the way and not get overwhelmed by that.
Yeah. And when you were building a team and building out a culture and building a brand, what were for you some of the non-negotiables? What were the things that you just sort of
Yes.
laid into with your team?
Oh, gosh, the biggest one that I can tell you, and it's the best one that I can give you and all of your listeners, is that you have to start with why.
Mhm.
You have to start with why. Let me tell you a story. Can I?
Sure, please. Yes.
Well, after the first Whole Foods order, I figured out quickly that I needed about 20 people or so to help me make 10,000 pounds of salsa weekly. So I went to the Small Business Administration. I said, hey, can you help me get 20 people? And they said, no, we don't do that. Here's a number for the state. So I called the state, asked the same question. They're like, oh, we'll have 20 people for you tomorrow. And I was like, yeah, exactly. I was the same house. And I was like, this is great. So I rented a little room. When I went in this room, it was mostly guys, men. And the first thing that I said to them was, hi, guys, my name is Magie Cook. I have an awesome pico de gallo de salsa. Nobody else has it. And guess who wants it? Whole Foods. And I believe that we're going to become the largest fresh salsa company in the US. And you guys are going to help me take it there. And they were like, yeah, I got them pumped up. And we got to work. And every day during production, I was renting this FDA approved kitchen an hour away from my home and making products during the day and at night. And when we would have breaks, I would have these meetings with them and I'd bring him food. And we would always talk about how to make production better because we were growing so fast. There were so many changes in the how we ran everything. And our conference room was outside in the rocks. That's all we had. One of the meetings, one day we finish, everybody goes in. This guy stays behind, and he's an African American guy. He's sitting on a rock, and I thought there was something wrong. He started tearing up, and I said, "Are you okay?" And he puts his hand to his chest. He says, "Maggie, thank you so much for hiring me. Nobody else would hire me. I just came out of prison and I did this, and that." And I was like, I said, "I don't want to know." I said, "You're awesome. Let's just go back to work." Because he was awesome. And I remember getting very scared and shaky. And I called the state and I said, "Hey, you sent me someone from prison." And they're like, "Yeah, they're all from prison." But they were the best people I ever had. Why? Because from the beginning, I started with why.
Mm.
I brought them all together. And for them, it was about becoming and doing something bigger than themselves. And that's how we carried the company. And we grew so large with having this kind of mindset and this kind of every single day I was showing up. I was their cheerleader. I was coaching them. There's a lot of coaching that happens, when you're growing your company, but you have to start with that. The other thing that you have to really look at is yourself and ask yourself, what are the values that I have that I want to instill in my organization? Because whatever your culture you build is a direct reflection of who you are as a CEO, as a leader, and it shows. So if your values are not aligned, if you're not, in the right mindset, if you're not in the right way of doing things, then it's going to be like that for the culture. It's going to be nasty. It's not going to be so good. You're going to have so much employee turnover, So many bad things could happen.
It almost sounds like you could have added another R, and that would be redemption.
Redemption?
Yeah.
Oh,
For a lot of these employees, yeah.
yes.
So the thing I would love to, we're coming up a little bit on our time, but I would love for you to talk a little bit about post-sale to Campbell. You have done so much. You have done so much to share your story. You wrote your book, which I think was in and of itself, we could have a whole nother 30 minutes talking about that experience,
Yes.
that process. You have spoken all over the world to audiences, to leaders, to teams, some very large companies. Um, and also what I really want to hone in on is the work that you're doing now philanthropically. You have gone back and helped your
Yes.
brothers and sisters and beyond that. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and how people can get involved.
Yes. So when I sold my company in 2015, I got a call from my brother, and he was running the orphanage and was telling me that 50 people were coming from the cartel to take over and take the kids. And I flew directly to Mexico, and we got involved with the federales in the military and took over. I remember watching the kids for like a month with a gun, and I have photos of all this stuff and video, and um, came back when everybody was safe and we got custody of all the kids. Um, and I decided to start my organization, my foundation, Magdalena Cook, and we're helping, we're working with close to 20 different orphanages in Mexico and many other causes that we are supporting with people in poverty and with drug addiction, kids, young adults with drug addiction, many, many, many different things. And so it's been just, kind of like a full circle moment for me, in many ways, going back and saving these kids, and going back and realizing I found a photo where I was speaking on stage, like doing poetry, and look what I'm doing today. Like life is full of full circle moments. And sometimes that's how you find meaning and purpose, because sometimes you do need to take inventory of your life and see what are the things that you love doing and how can you relate. What's the meaning that I can bring to the work that I'm doing today to light up that fire, to give me that passion, that purpose. And it really happens that way. Sometimes it happens by accident, and sometimes you need to look for it.
Yeah.
And it's either way, it's a blessing.
Either way.
Yes.
Well, Maggie, we are going to share your book, your social media handle, some website addresses for your speaking and for your philanthropic endeavors, all that in the show notes. So I do want to thank you so much for being with us today, and we are so stoked about seeing you live and in person at the conference in March. So thank you so much, and we will see you again soon.
I'm looking forward to it. You have no idea. I'm so excited.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to Momentum Matters. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast as we share more important conversations with women leaders. We would love for you to rate our show and share with others in your life. This episode of Momentum Matters was produced by Social U and brought to you by America's Thrift Stores, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Alabama, Protective Life, and Regions Bank. A full list of corporate partners can be found at momentumleaders.org. We also want to thank the individual donors, Momentum members, and volunteers for their commitment to our mission.